Hey buddy. Welcome back with Movie Adult Recapped. This time we will summarize the plot of the film titled The Men from Deep River. It is an exhibition film released in Italy in 1972. Before you watch this video, don't forget to subscribe. Let's not miss the next videos. The film begins by featuring a photographer who is the main character, named John Bradley. Now that he was in the city center in Thailand. At that time he continued to explore the area there, from boat rides to walking. Sometimes, so he took some photos and moments when he saw a good view. Not to forget, Bradley also took pictures of indigenous culture there. And he was told about the cannibal tribe that still exists today. And according to sources, the film is based on a true story. 1 week later, Bradley was watching a boxing fight. But, his friend was not comfortable while there. Because someone is flirting with him. He was upset and chose to leave. After the boxing match ended, Bradley realized that he had gone from there. And suddenly, the man who teased his friend accidentally bumped into Bradley and threatened with a knife. As a citizen of a Western country that upholds martial arts, Bradley turned things around and accidentally killed that man. Because he panicked, he immediately left. He went by train to around Thailand and photographed the scenery while on the train. Suddenly there are police on the train to find the killer in the boxing place. Bradley, who feared arrest, pretended to sleep so as not to be suspected. When you get to your destination, it turned out that Bradley had hired a local tour guide named Chuan. The two of them began their journey to the border. But to get there Bradley had to ride a motorcycle. And when they arrived at the village, Bradley stole the opportunity to take photos of the traditional activities there. While Chuan was preparing the boat to sail. Then, when it's about to leave, Bradley is warned not to approach the border village area. But Bradley didn't care about the ship's owner's advice. And Bradley gave them a tip so they could sail to the border village. This was done because Bradley was being hunted by the police because of his murder. After they sailed, Bradley really enjoyed the trip. He also immediately photographed the scenery around the river to swim in the river. After being satisfied with his activities, Bradley, who was exhausted, fell asleep. Suddenly, Bradley was built and Chuan was no longer on the ship. Bradley panicked and immediately looked for Chuan. Finally he saw the helmet worn by Chuan on the riverbank. And he also had the initiative to swim there. But from a distance he saw Chuan's body that had been floating in the water. He also accelerated his swimming in order to help Chuan. But Bradley was targeted by a tribe of cannibals who were on the border. And he was finally exposed to the net that had been prepared by the cannibal tribe. After being caught in a net, he was taken to a cannibal tribal village and hanged in a net. The next day Bradley started the day with a less pleasant view. When he wakes up from his sleep, he sees two people from a local tribe who are being executed for violating the tribe's rules. During the day, there was a beautiful and charming woman who might feel empathy for Bradley. He finally asked his father to release Bradley from the net. It turned out that this woman's father was the cannibal chief of the village. A few hours later, Bradley was released, but he had to pick up the fish in the river for the tribe's dinner. But suddenly, came the chief and told to release Bradley. Then he was tied up in a small house. Bradley finally felt uncomfortable with the situation and conditions he was experiencing. The next day he was no longer in brackets. On the condition that he must do the work ordered by the chieftain. The distance saw the son of the chieftain named Mariah watching Bradley with a sweet smile. Bradley, who saw him, immediately replied to Mariah's smile gently. Bradley feels Mariah likes him. Then while on his lunch break, Mariah accidentally met Bradley and brought him lunch. But Bradley did not want to eat the food brought by Mariah. He even bit Mariah's hand. But Mariah is not angry. Instead, Mariah even caught up with a bite from Bradley when he arrived home. Then there was an old woman to meet Bradley, who turned out he could speak English. He told Bradley that today there would be a celebration in the village. And if Bradley wants to escape the village, it's a good opportunity to do it. Shortly thereafter, the chief came and told his men to release Bradley. After being released, Bradley went around the village thinking about the words of the grandmother earlier. Suddenly, a helicopter passed over the village. The villagers who knew there was a helicopter on top of them, They immediately hid. But Bradley instead asked for help to the heliporter so he could get out of the village. But Bradley's efforts to get help to the helicopter were futile. Finally, after the helicopter left, Bradley was arrested and punched by several villagers. There was also one man who wanted to kill Bradley with a spear. Mariah, who saw him quickly, immediately stopped the angry villagers. At night, the old woman went to see Bradley and gave him a traditional medicinal herb to treat his wound. And while on medication, Bradley asked the grandmother for help to find a small boat so Bradley can escape from the village. But this old woman warned Bradley, if this is not the right time for him to escape from the village, because the punishment in this village is not arbitrary. And it could also be life that is at stake. The next day, Bradley is working. Suddenly someone fell and died on the spot. As per the custom there, the person is immediately cremated. After the cremation ceremony is over, the wife of the victim must have sex with one of the people of the tribe. This is done as a symbol of the woman is now separated from her husband and has become a widow. When everyone is at the funeral, Bradley steals the chance to leave the village. He went with makeshift equipment which was using pointed bamboo. But unfortunately, some villagers saw Bradley trying to leave the village and reported it. Then the fighters went to immediately pursue Bradley. At first Bradley managed to hide, but he was eventually caught and they fought. Long story short, Bradley was able to defeat the leader of the village's tribal forces, until Bradley ran out of energy and lay on the ground. After conscious, Bradley was confused because he was surrounded by so many people. The chief ordered his citizens to take Bradley home and not to be killed. Bradley was going to replace the chief soldier of the village tribe, whom he had already killed. But before that, he had to be punished for killing the villagers. He was punished by being tied to all his limbs and in the sun, until he became very dehydrated and eventually fainted. And when the next day, Bradley was at work, he was summoned by the chieftain and told to eat an animal brain as a symbol has officially become the chief soldier of the villagers. And after that he did, he was now officially a warrior of that tribe. After he was appointed, he finally didn't need to work roadie anymore. But suddenly there was a report of a child dying. He immediately checked there, and it turned out that there was already a village shaman who tried to cure the child with his knowledge. The shaman said, if this child has been possessed by demonic creatures that come from the village. But Bradley didn't believe in mysticism. He helped her with the knowledge she had. Finally, this child was helped and healed as usual. The chief was even more proud of Bradley, but not the shaman from the village. The next day, there will be a competition for the men to be Mariah's husbands. Long story short, Bradley can take the flowers that are in Mariah's hands. So now Bradley won the contest and managed to get Mariah. They were both married and very happy, until they have sex in a field. The village shaman is not happy with Bradley, giving a curse through an evil spell for their relationship. On the other hand, Bradley looks very romantic. Mariah is now studying English in order to communicate well with her husband. A few days later, Bradley was called his in-laws and received the news that Mariah was pregnant. Bradley was so happy to hear the news. Even though they were pregnant, Bradley and Mariah continued to have sex everywhere. Once upon a time Mariah was away and he suddenly felt dizzy. Fortunately, there was an old woman who immediately brought Mariah to the house. According to the grandmother, this is the effect of getting pregnant young. After Mariah healed, Mariah was invited by her husband to look for fresh air together on the riverbank. But Bradley gets a report if there's another tribe attacking the village. They left immediately. But when it was about to leave, suddenly the vision of Mariah blurred and not clear to see. He was taken away by Bradley's friend. Bradley went to war against the enemy. The war was eventually won by Bradley. After he finished the war, he immediately returned home to check on his wife's condition. Unfortunately, Bradley's wife was sentenced to be blind. Bradley was very sad to hear that. He got the idea that his wife would be taken to the city center in Thailand for medical treatment in the hospital. Finally, they decided to leave the village. They escaped by boat and were helped by an old grandmother. Unfortunately, they were caught with the villagers again. Long story short, Mariah will give birth that day. At that very moment, another tribe attacked the village back at the same time. And the evil village shaman was killed when the village was attacked. Finally, I evacuated so that she could give birth. But after the baby came out, Mariah became dying and her condition became critical. After being healed at all costs, there is still no change. He finally felt that he was going to die soon. He asked his father to unite his heart with Bradley forever with the customary traditions in the tribe. Mariah's father immediately granted his beloved daughter's request. After the ritual was over, Mariah finally died peacefully in Bradley's arms. Bradley went to reflect on the passing of his beloved wife. But he shouldn't drag on forever in grief. Because life is long. And finally he ordered his entire army to build the village of Ree, which had been destroyed by attack. Finally the film ended. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to request a movie, please comments below. Don't forget to press the like button, share, and subscribe. And turn on the bell so we can quickly get AdSense.